Today I want to talk about what is easily one of my three favorite films of all time. And it's not a science fiction film. It's not even a fiction film. It's not a narrative film at all. It's something that could be described as a documentary, or maybe even a music video, or just as cinema, period. And the movie is called Koyaanisqatsi, and it was created by Godfrey Reggio in roughly the period of 1977 through 1980. It was filmed over a period of several years in bits and pieces, and with a music score by Philip Glass. And the idea behind the film is incredibly difficult to describe because it's been promoted more as an experience than as anything else. It's something that you simply sit down and watch and process and deal with on your own. And the bigger a screen you can see it on, the better. It's not hard to get a copy of the movie on home video, but honestly, the best way to see it is in a theater of some kind on the biggest possible screen with the best possible sound system, or if you are super duper lucky, you can get to see it with a live musical accompaniment. Brooklyn Academy of Music, for instance, had a performance like this at one point, and I missed it, and I kicked myself every day for not having hustled up my way over there and seen it when I still lived in the area. So the basic idea behind the film, again, is that it is a series of images set to music, which are roughly in the service of a thesis about the interplay between man, nature, and technology. And so the first 15 or 20 minutes of the film are simply pure nature, and they're filmed mainly in the Southwest, in what's called the Four Corners area in Nevada, and in a few other places in California and so forth. And it's many, many minutes before we begin to see even any signs of human activity. And they manifest at first in the form of agriculture, in the form of what used to be things growing wild, now beginning to take geometric shapes. And then we segue from that into machinery transforming the landscape, into vehicles, into buildings. This is where my favorite segment of the film comes in, where we see the infamous doomed housing project Pruitt-Igoe being demolished, and then having that contrasted with all the other kinds of demolition and construction that takes place in our world. Much of this imagery is shown in either highly speeded up or highly slowed down form. So what happens is that after a while, what we are seeing and how we are seeing it start to become abstracted from each other. There's this segment about 20 minutes in the middle of in roughly the second half of the film, called The Grid, which is almost a panegyric to civilized living in all of its energy and all of its diversity. You would think that, for a movie that is theoretically critical of our relationship to technology, it seems quite celebratory. And in fact, Reggio has gone on record saying, yes, that's the idea. That at the same time, I am revealing the beauty of the beast, as he put it. And these images are unbelievably hypnotic, especially when accompanied by Glass's score, which is equally pattern-heavy and hypnotic and repetitive in a good way. And again, what he's presenting you with are things that you're surrounded with every single day. And yet at the same time, you see them in a way that is transformed, that you are forced to see as new. It's not a coincidence that when the movie was released in theaters, it had a poster, and this was also in the trailers, where the tagline was, "Until now, you've never really seen the world you live in." And again, that was the idea. It was to take all of the things that we are surrounded with and that we just don't look at because they're just part of our environment in every sense of that word, and to get us to notice them. And the way that this happens through the course of the film is partly through contrasts. There's this great moment where we see a cityscape from space, top-down view of a city, and then that's immediately contrasted with a electron microscope photograph of a microchip, and we realize, that at the big scale and at the small scale, these things completely resemble each other. The order, the regimentation, and so forth, and we're not being told that this is bad, but we are being told rather, our world has dimensions to it that we just ignore compulsively because we live inside them. And so this is an attempt to get us to live a little bit outside of that, to see it as if we were aliens from another planet in a way, and to give us a certain degree of remove from the things that we don't notice, that we live and breathe. And that's why seeing this on the biggest possible screen is such a jolting experience. My own first experience with it, they aired it on PBS as part of the Great Performances series. I think this was in 1981 or something like that, possibly 1982. And I saw it on the little tiny rinky-dink 13-inch color TV that my parents had at the time, which was also the same TV I ended up seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey on the first time. Not the ideal way to see either of those films, but even when shrunk to the size of a piece of paper, it still had an unbelievable degree of influence on me, especially as a young person. And then later on, it became hard to come by because of a dispute over who owned the film. Eventually that was resolved, and then Criterion, God love them, they brought out a box set that contained Koyaanisqatsi and also its two successor films, which were made many years apart after that, Koyaanisqatsi and Koyaanisqatsi. And I'm not as enthusiastic about the other two, if only because the first one was just so singular and just so cohesive in its vision. But they're all worth seeing as parts of a whole. Absolutely, the first one is worth seeing, even if you don't touch the other two. Now, part of the reason that I wanted to talk about the movie is because I'm always fascinated with the way that a work of art, a work of fiction, can present us with the world, or parts of the world, some aspect of our lives, some aspect of who we are, what we are, in a way that is alienating and fresh. And science fiction and fantasy, I think, are both supremely equipped to do those things, because that is frequently what they do. They are frequently, more often than not, about what is in front of us right here and now, drastically transformed, and forcing us to look at them, through the eyes of strangers, through the eyes of the future. I do think science fiction does this to a greater degree than fantasy does, but I do think fantasy can and should do this, because in each of those genres you have different modalities, you have different aims, you have different goals, and you can accomplish very different things by way of how they both can provide this sort of alienation effect. And when I watched Koyaanisqatsi most recently, I watch it like every 5 or 6 months. It's like vitamins in a way. You just keep going to act for more. And I remember thinking to myself, well, number one, it's incredible how bottomless this movie is. There isn't a single uninteresting shot in it. There are some shots in this thing that I could look at for the rest of my life. And that made me that much more conscious about what it was trying to get me to notice and why. And that also made me think about how rarely we tend to do this sort of thing in any fiction. And most fiction is here to tell us a story. It is here to give us something that has a formula. And I am not saying this because formulas are bad. Many truly successful things begin with a formula and end up in a very different place. I'm saying this because to not be conscious of those things, to not be aware of what else is possible and why, means you're cutting yourself off from a lot of possibilities. So when I watch the movie, I'm constantly being reminded of what else we can do with visual storytelling, and to what end, about how we can, and I'm going to quote Reggio here, how we can take all of the foreground that exists in a story normally, the plot, the characterizations, and all the rest of it, and just rip it out and just present everyone with the background, because the background is, again, the thing that we don't question. It's the thing that we don't think about. And to the extent that we can do that in fiction, it's tricky. It's tricky because, as with a movie like Koyaanisqatsi, it's not going to appeal to everybody. There are some people, they watch Koyaanisqatsi, they get bored after 10 minutes, or they can't stand the way the imagery keeps assaulting them, and they feel attacked by the film, and they just leave. Other people, they're mesmerized from beginning to end. But not everything has to be for everybody. And the more modalities you become aware of as a creator, the more you get a sense of what is possible and why, outside of whatever immediate circle you're working in, the more tools you have in the long run to draw on that will allow you to tell more and better kinds of stories. I don't say any of this because I want to make something like Koyaanisqatsi, but rather I want to be able to take all of the ways this thing has made me that much more conscious of how unquestioned our view of our world is, on a day-to-day basis and make that part of something that I'm going to do. This whole sense of, the awakening of vision, that's something that I want to try to weave into a story where I can. And I know that sounds like a tall order. I know that sounds really abstract. I know that sounds really like 2 or 3 stages removed from anything a lot of people will be doing. But those are the kinds of things that get sparked off when I see stuff like this. I think it's healthy for people to have encounters with things that exist mainly on their own terms and that are difficult. Not because I'm a snob, but because I think it's going to be a good way for them to figure out what is it about it that they like, what is it that they don't like, what is it that they are discovering about themselves in the process. And again, this isn't for everybody, but I still encourage everybody to at least try, because on the other side of trying, you will often come away with things you never knew that you had. So once again, the film is Koyaanisqatsi, directed by Godfrey Reggio, with music by Philip Glass. The score is available as a CD on its own, and they've actually had a couple of different iterations of it over the years. The most recent one is just basically the original recordings for the film remastered. That's really the best one to get. The film itself, again, is available via the Criterion Collection. It's also available, incredibly enough, on YouTube via their free ad-supported tier. So you can watch it for nothing except the cost of an occasional commercial interruption, although it is available in a slightly less spectacular visual quality than you would if you got the Blu-ray. I am still waiting to see if Criterion will eventually give this a 4K upgrade. I can't see them not doing it at some point, but who knows when that's going to happen. For now, we've got the discs, we've got the streaming copies, and we've got an experience which, if you ever get the chance to see live or with an audience, go do it. And when you do, think about what it's showing you about the world that we're living in and how that world tends to disappear right in front of our own eyes and gets replaced by our ideas about it. So that's a really refreshing experience to have every once in a while, I think. So that's it for now. Until next time, stay curious.